which is a research organization just on campus. We do environmental research mostly on the St. Lawrence River. And yeah, so I'll just get going. So I take care of the visual communications for the organization. So this includes photography. I've learned graphic design, and I did a 2-year program in environmental tech and sciences. So that really helps me understand what it is I'm photographing or communicating. Yeah. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about who I am and how I got to where I am. I went to CCVS for grades 11 and 12. I always loved painting and drawing. Art was a part of me from a very young age, but also nature. I spent a lot of time in the bush, and it was a happy place for me, a place of inspiration. So when I was in high school and we were creating artwork, I had Mrs. C. I don't know who's at CCVS here. Anybody at CC? No? Okay, amazing art teacher. I love her, and I still think about her all the time. But she really pushed us to create artwork that was a little bit different. So lots of sculptures, for example, and kind of connecting back that love for nature and the love for art. I had made this sculpture where I collected garbage from a forest I spent a lot of time in, and I kind of created, I guess, like this shape out of the chicken wire and stuffed it with the garbage. And it was really kind of a message on we are what we do and we are what we eat as well. And it was just kind of like a commentary on the way that we treat the environment. So this is kind of like the early days of connecting the art and nature together. And it wouldn't be till much later that I would find a career where I could actually bring them together. So the first DSLR I got was probably, I think it was in grade 11. And when I was asked to do this presentation, I went back into my old hard drives. So I have old hard drives from, I guess, about 15 years ago, to go through them and see what it was I was photographing and where did I start in my photographic journey. So really, at the beginning when I started taking photos, what I liked about it was that I could express myself faster than I could within a drawing or a painting or a sculpture. And that's what I really, really liked about it. So I pulled out some photos to kind of, show you that journey, but also give you some tips and share with you what I learned from myself as a teenager and how I was photographing and what I was shooting. So starting with my best friend and my mom, and just taking as many photos of your friends and your family as possible as a really good starting point to learn how to photograph people. It's generally much easier to photograph people that you know than strangers, right? It's a lot more intimate as well. And there's a lot less pressure of them being like, oh, show me the picture, is it good? To your friends and family, you're like, whatever. So yeah, that was a really good starting off point for photographing people. I included the picture in the middle because this is where I've seen my photography and love for nature kind of coming back together. And this photo was taken in a forest that now has been completely developed. It no longer exists. And had I not taken this photo, I wouldn't know that actually this plant, which is called a spring beauty and you can eat the roots, actually existed in that forest. And maybe no one would ever know. And so that's part of photography as well. It's like freezing time. It's showing something that might have been before that might no longer be as well. And kind of part of that same thought process is this last photo. Can you guess where this is? This is in Cornwall. No?
I think it's near Tollgate and Bridgewood area.
Yeah, okay, so not quite. It's between, where St. Lawrence High School is? Right, and then you have Galaxy and there's Nick Kaneb, that street in the middle. This was Nick Kaneb before. And so this is how it looked. And while it's not like an interesting place, I'm so happy I took that photo because there's probably no photos that exist of that place before the road was put in, and it will never look like that again. So that's also another piece of why photography is important. So that kind of leads me into my next point. And I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts on why you think photography is important and why we need it. That's okay. Okay, yeah, I put together some points just in case. So, one of the first things is as a witness to events and change. So kind of what I showed you with those pictures of places that are no longer or that have been completely changed. Also of, major events like the man on the moon, a photo from the 60s. We know this exists. It happened. There's a photo of it. It's a bit different now. We have, Midjourney and AI, so you can recreate pictures that actually are not real photos. There's Photoshop, we can completely change things, but let's say for this example, it works quite well. Uplifting stories that might otherwise go unnoticed. When you take a picture of something, I think it gives it even more importance than if there are no photos that exist of it. It helps to preserve our memories. So the example of the picture that I chose, so this is my mom picking wild ginger, which is a medicinal plant, in a forest that also is being developed to build houses, and she's here with some elders from Akwesasne, a medicine man. And so had there been no photos of this event, it's a memory that will fade and that, maybe we'll forget about, but now it's like concrete, it happened, and it's showing the amazing work that people are doing. You can, through photography, we can inspire people to change. And a really good example of that is all these photos of plastic in the ocean, right? And I don't know, a few years ago, there was a video or photos of the plastic straw in the turtle's nose. And now, there's paper straws everywhere. So, I think it had a global impact to see the effects of these damages. So it can be incredibly powerful. And then finally, photography as an outlet for creativity and expression. So also our mental health is really important. And I think personally, I don't think I would be as happy if I didn't have photography. It's really changed my life. And whether it's as a career or even just as a hobby, I think it's huge and it can make a really big difference. So here's some examples I got from an account on Instagram. There's some freelance photographers. They don't get paid very well when they're working in photojournalism for New York Times, for example. It's really like minimum. And so what they wanted to show is imagine you got rid of all these freelance photographers, what the world would look like and what the newspaper would look like. So here it is, captions, headlines, no photos. And then here it is with the photos, and just how important those pictures are for the amount of information that they give, the amount of emotion and feeling that they give for each of those stories. So here, this is basically the bulk of what I wanted to share with you today for my knowledge in terms of storytelling and narrative through photography. So really, there's 3 different ways of presenting that information that I really hope that you'll strive to do today and in future work for your storytelling. So 3 types of photos. So portraits, details, so close-ups, and scenes. And I think if you can get those 3 types of photos in your 10 images, it's a really good place to start for your stories. So I'll go through each of them to kind of describe what I mean. So here's a few examples of portraits. They're all quite different, but they're all just as important. Sometimes you could have 2 portraits in your series, but they're photographed differently. So for example, I have this portrait, which is more about the character and who this person is and the emotion that he's putting out. There's not much other information in that photo. It's really about Abe and who he is and how he was feeling in that moment. We have this second photo of Kate. It's a bit more of a classic portrait. She's looking at the camera, but she's also holding a prop. So this is giving more information in the photo. And for Kate, for example, you can see she's all muddied up. She has her fish. She's in a field. Okay, she must be catching fish in a creek or something. And so you're kind of building that narrative actually in the single photo. I think there's less emotion in this photo than there is in this one, for sure. But they're not one is better than the other. They have different purposes. And then the third photo is kind of like a mix between a scene and a portrait. So here you clearly see Ian, but you also see what he's doing and where he is. So part of your narrative in those 10 photos is trying to answer those 5 W's of who, what, where, when, how. Some of those are a little bit harder to answer, and that's okay. Sometimes you can't answer all of them, and that's where having context to your stories or having captions can be really helpful. But you try. And so, for example, this one gives you a lot more W's, for example, than this one. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It just has a different purpose. And then we have, so details and close-ups. Details and close-ups are really great because they're gonna give you, or they're gonna draw the viewer to something specific. There's a part of the story that you want them to be looking at that maybe if you were zoomed out, you won't be able to notice or see, or in a portrait you wouldn't see very well. I love doing close-ups, especially hands, because hands have lots of stories. They do a lot of things, right? So I think you can tell a lot from somebody's hands. And for example, for this picture, okay, we could probably guess, looks like there's a bird here. Probably a big bird, like a raptor. She has this scratch on her hand. So that's giving you a bit more information about the photo. You're not seeing the whole thing, and I do have an example of like what the whole story is later in my PowerPoint, but yeah, so that's, and then this one is really good too, I find, because, okay, you see he has his ribbon shirt. So he's indigenous. He's from Seneca Nation. He's part of Turtle Clan, so he's got his turtle shell necklace. He has a scar on his chest, so you could probably guess that maybe he had a heart attack or some kind of operation. And he has a pin, which actually you don't see super well here, but that pin is also significant to this person. So yeah, details are awesome, and they're really fun to get. And it also makes you get more intimate with who you're photographing, right? And then finally, scene. So scene really gives you a context of where those photos or where the story is taking place. This is where you really want to back up and look at it from far. Sometimes you're limited in how much you can back up. For example, in this one, I'm on a boat. I don't have much space before I fall into the water. But really, I think scenes, you try to go as far as you can to really capture as much information in the frame as possible. Hello. Oh yeah, thank you. So I put a few examples together of like kind of diptychs of images from the same stories to kind of show how much more information you get as you add photos into your story. So for example, these are you could say that these are both portraits, right? So we have this really close-up character portrait. He loves to laugh, he's always joking, and it really gives you a sense of who this person is. The second photo is telling you more where he is and what he's doing and potentially who he's with. I think the two photos together are so much stronger than if it was just one or the other. So something to think about when you're gonna be out today. If you're photographing a person, try to go in close, go in far, try to get different ways, go around your subject and see which, at every angle of what you think could work the best for them. And I mean, we're lucky in the digital age, you can take as many photos as you like, so you don't have to worry about that. Another example, this is Steve. He's a beaver trapper. If I just had this photo, I wouldn't know he was a beaver trapper. I would probably guess he spends a lot of time outside. He looks like an outdoorsy person. Maybe he's doing something that, makes a lot of noise, so he's plugging his ears. In this case, it was a tractor, but I don't have a photo of that here. And then we have a photo that's more of like a scene. Again, where are we and what are we doing? And just like as a side note for beaver trapping, it's actually really, really important now because we don't have any more predators to catch and eat the beavers. So if you leave beavers to just reproduce and have too many of them, they're going to completely eat all the trees. So we used to have wolves to control their populations. Unfortunately, we no longer have wolves here. And so we have people like Steve, watching those populations really closely. And then we go back to the ginger from the photo I showed you earlier. So here's a portrait, great portrait. We see where she is. We see kind of what she's doing. She's showing the roots of a plant. But when you look at this picture, you don't know what plant it is. You wouldn't really know. So when you put the second photo, okay, this is what the plant looks like, and this is what they're picking. And I added this one in because it doesn't always have to be about people. It can be about places. It could be about objects, plants, animals. It could be about anything. And just as much as you can take a portrait of a person, you can take a portrait of a plant. So for example, this is a pitcher plant. It's a carnivorous plant that you can find in certain types of wetlands. And then if I zoom out and pull out, this is what the habitat looks like. And sometimes they're a bit hard to see because you see they're like red, so they camouflage really well in the moss. So are there any questions or comments before I continue? Yeah? Okay, great. So here, let's build a narrative of more than 2 photos. So I put nine photos together. Okay, I'm starting with my portrait, who it is that I'm photographing. This is Christina Enright, by the way. She goes along the side of the roads to collect eggs and caterpillars from monarchs before the tractors come and cut everything down. Which you're only legally allowed to have 1 monarch to raise. She has a license so that she can have more, just a FYI. Okay, so let's build the story. So here we have Christina. This is the scene, this is where she is. You can see she's doing something, but from this photo, it's kind of hard to see exactly what she is doing. But she's doing something. It's in farmland. And then we add another photo. Okay, here's our detail. So we can see I didn't have a macro lens for this, but here we have a little monarch caterpillar egg. So maybe from this story you can take it that she goes and she's collecting the eggs or the caterpillars from the milkweed, which is over here. And here's the little egg, and she's looking at under a magnifying glass. All right. So here I added another, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a close-up. It could even be like a portrait of the caterpillars. A lot of these kind of photos kind of overlap, which is normal. But this is her setup, so it's giving you more information. So she's collecting the milkweed, fresh, every day. She puts it in the water, and all her plump, healthy caterpillars are eating leaves. Okay, so where is she putting them? She has this enclosure that she's created. So this is a scene, and it's a good example of a vertical scene image, because often we're going to think of scene images as being horizontal, right? Sometimes it can be vertical as well. I think usually horizontal works better, but it depends what. And in this case, the vertical image was enough space to get, the enclosure in. So yeah, there's her enclosure to protect her little caterpillars as they grow and they morph. We add some photos. Okay, let's go inside the enclosure. What does it look like? So here we have our milkweed, right? There's a bench. And if you looked at just this picture, and I know it's probably small on the screen right now, but there's a little chrysalis that's right under the bench. So really the monarchs had all the free range to go where they wanted in the space. And so here's a detail photo of that chrysalis. But you can see in the scene photo, maybe I wouldn't have been able to see the chrysalis. So I took a close-up to get that detail. And then finally, we have our butterflies, and she keeps them in this netted enclosure before releasing them to make sure that they're ready to leave and that they leave at the best time, not during a rainstorm, for example. And then here she is finally, super happy. She's releasing her monarch. I think she's proud of the work that she does, and I think it shows in this image. And just another piece about Christina that I didn't mention is part of this journey of collecting the caterpillars was because she got an injury and she could no longer work. So part of this photo is showing that injury or how she protects the injury, and then kind of, what came of that time that she had and what ended up being kind of savior for her, to not be just cooped up at home. She had something to do and to live for. Any questions or comments? Great. Okay, so I'll just finish off. I have a few more slides on a few tips and tricks for just general, for your general photographic journey. Look at a lot of photos. Find photographers and work that you love, dissect it, copy it, and figure out what it is about those photos that you love. It took me a while to really realize that, but finally, I started doing it, and my work just got so much better. And a good example of an artist that I've been following closely for many years is Alexi Hobbs. And I love his use of color, the composition, and the emotion in his photos. And like I said, I think since I started really dissecting his work and trying to figure out what is it that makes his work so good, it's made my work so much better. And also, if there's anything that you love and you're like, oh, I want to redo that, don't feel bad about copying something. That's how you're going to learn, and we're not going to reinvent any wheel. So, just things that I wish I had thought about when I was, a young budding photographer. Learn how to use your equipment. Learn how to use it manually if you have a camera like a DSLR, or I guess now it's a lot of mirrorless. Learn how to use it inside out. I wish I had learned when I was in high school how to use my camera technically, because I would have had so much more control over the images I was creating. And then I would have been a lot more successful in the work that I was producing at a much sooner than I was in the end. There are so many resources online, like YouTube and Google, it's super basic, but there's even TikTok. Honestly, sometimes I'll search for photography tips on there, and I'm always learning as well. So just, you never stop learning. And the example I put here was this lamp. So I shot this last Friday. I had a client ask me to photograph this lamp. It was a collaborative project. And they asked me, Steph, can you make it look like there's natural light coming through a window through trees? I had never done this kind of light before. This was new to me. So I guess it was last Thursday night. I was starting to panic because I was like, oh, I don't know. I've never done this before. And then I Googled it. I learned how to do it, and I delivered. And it was actually super easy. And then basically, if you wanted to make this kind of fake light through windows and trees, you get a big piece of cardboard, you cut out shapes through it, and then if you have an off-camera light, you just make the light go through. And then you change the distance of your cardboard from your light, and it will change the shapes. So it's actually really, really simple. So yeah, learn your equipment. Organize your files. This is huge. When I was going through my old hard drive to pull out those old photos to show you today, I ended up just renaming and refiling everything because it was a mess. Try to avoid leaving photos with names that are straight out of the camera. How are you gonna find this when you have hundreds of photos, right? So what I do every time I upload, and I do it every single time now, is I batch rename all my files. And my naming system is I start with the year, the month, the day, and then I'll put in some keywords that then if I'm going to go search in my archive, I'll find it like this. Versus, I'm not gonna remember MG 1121, this doesn't mean anything to me. So yeah, that's really big. Bring your camera everywhere with you. I still do, and every time, but sometimes I'll regret not bringing it with me. I hate when that happens, but I'm trying my best to always have it. And so, for example, I always drive by this place, on the, I guess, old Highway 2 in Somerstown, and now I'm starting a series of photographs on this location on the river through the seasons. And the only way that this is possible is I have to keep my camera with me at all times, because I never know when the light's going to be nice or when it will be a good time to get that photo. Shoot horizontally and vertically of everything. Whatever your subject is, turn your camera. Change it so that you have those options when you're going through your pictures after and you need to do the sequencing. You'll have those options, especially later if you end up working for a client, whether it be in photojournalism or you're doing commercial work, it doesn't matter. They're going to want to see both options. So yeah, always think about that. So yeah, here's that hawk that left the scratch on Lisa's hand. But here you don't see the scratch, right, from before. And so that's why I had that close-up image. And the last one is research your subject. So whatever it is you're photographing, learn as much as you can about it. Because the more you know about your subject, the better your photos will be. And so for one of the examples for me is the American eel. I know it's not everybody's favorite fish. They can be kind of creepy, right? Yeah. But they're actually really special, and I'll give you a little piece about it because that's what I'm passionate about, and I've been working for the last couple of years on a story about American eels. They're not doing very well here. They're critically endangered. You often find them cut up, and they're cut up because of the dam. They go through the turbines. They're big fish. So I'm trying to work on a story right now to bring that to the public because it's not a story that's really been told. And so I do a lot of research on it. I'm very lucky one of my colleagues did her PhD on eels, so that's been very helpful. But yeah, research, learn as much as you can, and be curious, ask questions. I guess that's pretty much it for my presentation for today. Do you have any? Thank you. You're the first class that I actually teach about what I photograph, so this is pretty cool. Thanks for listening.